everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. This is Sebastian Fonseca. We have the regular season of the NFL finally concluding with week 18, and we have the entire playoff bracket to break down and preview. But before we dive into this episode, subscribe to the channel and like this video. It makes a massive difference in the YouTube algorithm, and take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. Links are in the description. We have to start off with the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Last week, I didn't cover in the podcast, at least, with the Damar Hamlin incident, and I wanted to bring out my thoughts and prayers to Damar. I'm happy to hear that his recovery is going very smoothly, and it couldn't get off to a better start for the Buffalo Bills in this Week 18 matchup, where on the first play we saw an excellent kickoff return for a touchdown by Nyheim Hines, and it just seems so poetic. And this is the beautiful part of sports. It just sends goosebumps down your spine, and just you feel so happy. Damar was watching from his hospital bed. He was so happy to see that his teammates were playing so well for him, not just for the city of Buffalo. And overall, I mean, it just was Buffalo's day. I know that New England was coming into this game with a win and in the playoff situation, but it just wasn't in the cards for New England this year. They put up a decent fight for the first half, but in the second half, we saw that the Buffalo Bills just flexed their muscles and they're just the superior team. And this means that New England is knocked out of the postseason, and the Buffalo Bills clinched the second seed in the AFC. For Buffalo, this is another great win. I mean, they haven't lost since mid-November before Thanksgiving, and they've looked really impressive from that point onwards. I mean, they don't have any holes, and now they have some extra motivation to have a great postseason run. For New England, again, this is just coming down to how the offense doesn't have the type of firepower to compete with teams like the Buffalo Bills. I really hope, for the sake of Mac Jones's development, that Bill Belichick hires a legit offensive coordinator, as his growth and development have been stagnated this year due to Matt Patricia and Joe Judge being part of the play calling duties. So look for them to revamp the offensive room and help with Mac Jones's development in year 3. The Chicago Bears have been awarded the top overall pick in the 2023 draft, and this means that they'll be on the clock from now until late April. This was due to the fact that the Chicago Bears lost their matchup to the Minnesota Vikings, finishing with a 3-14 record. And thanks to Houston picking up a win against the Indianapolis Colts, which really puzzling stuff, because now with this pick that Chicago has as the top overall pick, I mean, they just have so many things that they can do with it. They can draft the best defensive player that they need because they already have a quarterback, or they could trade down and just get a boatload of picks to a QB-hungry team. Again, this is a puzzling thing for Houston. I mean, they had an opportunity to have the number 1 overall pick and draft a guy like Bryce Young, who's been a stud out of Alabama. So I don't know what Houston's game plan is. It's going to be interesting to see what they'll do in the offseason. If they don't get Bryce Young, I mean, they still could get a guy like CJ Stroud, which is a really good selection as well. But I just feel like right now, heading into the offseason, it's clear that Bryce Young should be the number 1 overall pick. An under-the-radar winner out of this events that happened on Sunday afternoon is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Back at the trade deadline, they traded their wide receiver Chase Claypool for a second-round pick. And with the Miami Dolphins forfeiting that pick, that means that the first overall pick in the second round is essentially the 32nd overall player in the draft, which is equivalent of a late first-round pick. So great value for a guy like Chase Claypool that really hasn't done much for Chicago, and this is a great thing for Pittsburgh to utilize and continue to beef up a roster that is trying to surround that young quarterback in Kenny Pickett with talent. On Saturday, we had the AFC South championship game between the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Titans are coming in riding their 3rd quarterback of the season thanks to an injury to Ryan Tannehill, and then also Malik Willis not being totally equipped to handle the starting duties of a quarterback in the NFL. He's a very raw prospect, and I think they'll try to develop him in the offseason and give him more reps in the preseason moving forward to try and see if he can win the starting job going into 2023. With the playoff berth on the line, they decided to go with Joshua Dobbs going up against a very hot Jacksonville Jaguars team who were coming into this matchup winning 4 straight. For the most part of this game, this was actually favoring the Tennessee Titans. I mean, they had a really good running attack with Derrick Henry. Josh Dobbs made smart decisions with the ball, but in the second half, he kind of came unraveled thanks to the Jaguars pass rush. They forced errant throws. One was an interception that was returned into field goal range. They got 3 points out of, and then the defining play of the whole game was a fantastic play by their safety Jenkins, who got around the offensive tackle and forced a strip sack and was returned for a touchdown by defensive end Josh Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this was the difference in the game. They won 20-16, and they're going to the postseason for the first time since 2017. Many people wrote off the Jags after their 2-5 start. They even had a couple weird losses in the middle part of the season, but after they got a nice victory against the Baltimore Ravens, this really turned things around for the Jaguars. I mean, Trevor Lawrence's development has been monumental thanks to Doug Peterson in his ear. I mean, he's clearly a quarterback guru. I mean, he's been a great guy in developing quarterbacks, or at least coaching quarterbacks. We saw it in Philadelphia with Carson Wentz in year 2, made a huge leap from his rookie year. And then Nick Foles on that Super Bowl run. In his 6 years coaching, he's made 4 postseason appearances. He's won 3 division titles, and he's won 4 postseason games, including a Super Bowl victory back in 2017. The Jaguars really nailed the head coaching position after really messing up with Urban Meyer in 2021. But now, looking to the future, this Jaguars team is going to be a really good team of the future as long as Trevor Lawrence continues to develop. And hats off also to the Jaguars front office. I mean, they made some interesting acquisitions in free agency with Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, for example. These all really helped out in Trevor Lawrence's development, as Zay Jones has been a solid receiver on the outside. They've also really been utilizing Christian Kirk, who went over 1,000 yards, a really impressive receiver, and he was great in Saturday night's matchup against the Tennessee Titans. And then also Evan Ingram, who was on a 1-year prove-it deal after coming on from the New York Giants, but rekindled that form that he had back in 2020 that was a Pro Bowl season. So they have some talent, and I think they're going to be a really big contender moving forward in the AFC. And they have some really impressive pieces, and like I said, as long as Trevor Lawrence continues to make those steps, I think the Jaguars are going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. I spoke about Miami making the wild card, and that was mostly due to Skylar Thompson managing a really nice game against the New York Jets. In that matchup, they came into the matchup with Joe Flacco starting off as quarterback for the New York Jets, as Mike White was dinged up with that chest injury and he didn't need to be put out there with nothing to play for. Still, the Jets defense had a really good day. I mean, they limited Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Both were definitely banged up, as Tyreek Hill actually left the game due to that lingering ankle injury that he's been dealing with since about December. So that's something to keep an eye out for, but still, hats off to Skylar Thompson. I mean, he had a pretty solid game. He wasn't the reason why they won, but he also wasn't the reason why they lost. A clean game, no turnovers, made the smart throws, smart reads where he needed to be. And now the Miami Dolphins join the postseason mix as they end a 6-year postseason drought. In year 1 of Mike McDaniel's coaching run, I think it's been really successful. Now, he's got to find a way to figure out who's going to be starting at quarterback, as we don't know if Tua's going to be able to clear concussion protocol, and then they also have Teddy Bridgewater banged up with that broken pinky. But if those two can't go, it'll be Skylar Thompson in the postseason against the Buffalo Bills. The afternoon slate of games had a lot of playoff implications for the NFC, as the Philadelphia Eagles took on the New York Giants. The Giants came into this resting their starters, as they'll be playing a wild card matchup in the next week. The Eagles had a lot to play for, as they had a chance to clinch the NFC East and also lock up home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. Not the best of performances by the Eagles, but thankfully Jalen Hurts was back. He was pretty solid in the first half. I mean, a lot of drives just bogged down in the red zone, so there's some rust there on Jalen's part, not being in the offense for 2-3 weeks. I mean, the defense clamped down when needed. I mean, they just pitched a shutout until a flurry of points in the second half. Overall, not the most impressive performances by the Eagles. I mean, they did a solid job defensively when needed, except for that one instant where Darius Slay allowed Kenny Golladay to score a touchdown to make it somewhat of a game that needed an onside kick to really ice the deal. But still, the Eagles are going to be going in having an extra week of rest, and they have a chance to game plan for the next opponent. Moving on to the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Washington Commanders. This was Sam Howell's first start at quarterback, and really interesting to see how he was able to do in what was a meaningless matchup for the Commanders, but the Cowboys still had something to play for. They could win the NFC East and move on to the number 2 seed, or even win home field advantage throughout the playoffs if certain things happen. But Dak Prescott looked really bad for most of this game. I mean, he completed just 14 out of 38 passes for about 128 yards. A touchdown pass late in the first half that kind of boosted his stat line, but through a couple bad throws on the outside. The first one was nearly intercepted but dropped, but then on the next play he threw it the same exact way, and this time the cornerback was able to make him pay, taking it back for a pick six. And now he has a streak of games that he's thrown interceptions, and I think he's thrown about 3 pick sixes this season. So Dak has been really concerning. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what he'll look like in the playoffs, but we'll see what happens. Overall, I think the Cowboys are limping into the postseason. They're not playing their best ball, but they do have a pretty favorable matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that we'll talk about a little bit later in this podcast. The San Francisco 49ers dismantled the Arizona Cardinals, and this means that the Niners move up to the number 2 seed in the NFC postseason. Overall, I mean, Brock Purdy had a pretty impressive day with 3 touchdown passes. The defense was solid for the most part. They limited the whatever remnants of the Arizona offense to 13 points, but they have the 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft, so that's really an attractive thing that's going to really help out this Arizona Cardinals team moving forward. But on a sad note, JJ Watt announced his retirement earlier in the week, and this was his last game. He did record a sack in this game, so he definitely goes out on a high note personally. He's had a really great career. I mean, hampered by injuries for the better part of 2016 to 2018, but overall, that early stint where he had 3 Defensive Players of the Year awards and he had a bevy of sacks to start off his career, a whole monster down in Houston, and he's done so much for that community. I wish him a happy retirement, and I'm looking forward to see what he does post-playing career. So now looking at the AFC postseason picture, we know that the Kansas City Chiefs have the bye, so they won't be playing next weekend. Then we have Miami against Buffalo, and then the Baltimore Ravens against Cincinnati, and then the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Miami Dolphins will be taking on the Buffalo Bills in a matchup in Orchard Park, and we don't know who will be starting at this point in time for the Miami Dolphins. It could be Tua, it could be Skylar Thompson, it could be Teddy Bridgewater. We just don't know. But Buffalo should be heavy favorites in this game. Miami's coming into this postseason looking very shaky. I mean, not only just at the quarterback position, they've lost 5 straight games before they won today to get into the postseason. Overall, I mean, it is a successful season, but I think Buffalo should win this quite comfortably. It just seems to be going something their way. I mean, they just need something to continue to propel them moving forward. They've been overcoming a bevy of injuries, and also just with the Damar Hamlin incident, I mean, they just have some extra motivation to play for their fallen teammates. I think they'll dispatch their division rivals quite easily, and Buffalo's going to coast to the divisional round. In another divisional matchup in the wild card round, we have the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. These 2 teams met in Week 18, but it'll be a completely different matchup in the wild card round. In Week 18, we saw a 3rd-string quarterback go into Cincinnati for the Baltimore Ravens, so it's definitely not going to be the same thing. As there's a good chance that Lamar Jackson will be back after coming off that knee injury that he sustained early in December, so he's getting some time to rest and heal up for that. We'll see if his return makes any difference to the Baltimore roster, because he brings a lot of more dynamic opportunities for the Baltimore offense to get jump-started. He's just such a dynamic playmaker, but I just don't know if they have the offensive weapons to keep up with Cincinnati's high potent offense. It's going to come down to their defense. I mean, they did acquire Roquan Smith, who's a stud linebacker. Their secondary is definitely going to be tested. I mean, they have Marcus Williams in the safety spot, but they also have Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey in the cornerback positions going up against Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and even Tyler Boyd. I think the matchup still favors Cincinnati quite handedly, as also they have Joe Burrow at quarterback. It's just going to be too many things for Baltimore to keep track of, and I think Cincinnati's going to win this probably a little bit closer if Lamar goes off and he makes a game out of it by himself, but I think Cincinnati's going to win this maybe by a touchdown at least. And then probably the most enticing matchup, at least in the AFC playoff bracket, is going to be the LA Chargers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both teams have quarterbacks that are really young, but also very exciting prospects with Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, each making their playoff debuts, and they're going head to head. So I'm going to be definitely tuning into this as much as possible because I want to see what these quarterbacks are made of when the lights shine the brightest. The Chargers had a lot of injuries earlier this season, but Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have been healthy and back into the lineup, so that's been helping out Justin Herbert quite a bit. They also been developing a little bit of a running game with Austin Eckler, so that kind of balanced in this Chargers offense is going to be a big thing moving forward in this postseason run. Defensively, they've been leaky because of their injuries to the secondary, and they can definitely be had due to favorable matchups with guys like Christian Kirk and Zay Jones on the outside for the Jaguars, but their pass rush is definitely going to be bolstered thanks to Joey Bosa's return, and they also have Khalil Mack. If these pass rushes can get into Lawrence's face, as we know that he has a little bit of a fumbling issue, but also just disrupt the timing with his receivers, it'll be a big help for the Chargers' hopes of winning this game. Now, with the Jaguars, they do have home field advantage in this matchup, and they have a great crowd that's going to be helping them out. The Jaguars' defense is definitely an opportunistic unit, as they've been forcing some key turnovers during this 5-game win streak. I also worry for the Chargers' run defense, as a guy like Travis Etienne is a really dynamic running back, and we know that the Chargers' run defense has been quite leaky. We'll see if the Jaguars will dial up a steady dose of Travis Etienne in this matchup, as that will bode well and also bring some balance for the Jaguars offense and bring some pressure off of Trevor Lawrence. I'll take the Los Angeles Chargers to win this matchup just by the slightest of hairs. I just have a little bit more faith in Justin Herbert than I do Trevor Lawrence. We saw the New York Giants take on the Minnesota Vikings earlier this year on Christmas Eve, and they hung tough with the Vikings for most of that matchup. It took a 61-yard kick by Greg Joseph to propel the Vikings to victory. So I do think the Giants have what it takes to contend with the Vikings. We know that the Vikings tout a really high potent offense led by Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, and Dalvin Cook, but they know that Kirk Cousins has come up small in these big postseason opportunities. So we'll see how they match up with the Giants. They do have home field advantage, and I think that's a big help for them. And the Giants are a young team, and they haven't really been there in this type of moment. It's going to be very possible for the Giants to pull off an upset. I mean, the Vikings have been a shaky team as they come into this game with a point differential of -3. So that means that they've been getting blown out in their losses, which is only 4, and that can tell you that how badly these losses can be for the Vikings. And then they either win their games by the slightest of margins. So I think if the Giants are able to bury the Vikings early and withstand whatever rally that the Vikings can withstand, and I think that means that the Giants will be able to pull off the upset victory. So I'm going to take the Giants and be a little bit bold in this postseason pick. The Dallas Cowboys are traveling to Tampa Bay to take on Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. Now, both teams have been interesting this season. They started off on that Sunday night opener with the Bucs winning 19-3, but it's been a really different season since then. Since that matchup, we've seen that Dak Prescott has gotten injured and then on the bench for a little bit with that injury and then came back. He's been solid, but then started turning the ball over quite a bit, so it's going to be interesting to see how he takes in this postseason pressure. And for the Bucs, it's been a really up and down season, but mostly been down as their defense has been leaky. The offense has been in a total rut. He's been fighting with receivers, the offensive staff, and also just breaking Surface Pro after Surface Pro as we've seen these temper tantrums on a weekly basis. They get to host this matchup, so that's going to be favoring the Bucs in the slightest of margins. Now, both teams have been very untrustworthy. I know Dallas has been particularly untrustworthy, especially when they go to play outdoors in grass fields particularly. Now, we've seen them struggle against the Washington Commanders and other teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars and even the Philadelphia Eagles on natural grass compared to their turf field at AT&T Stadium. So their defense can't be as high flying and fast as they like to be onto the ball. So we'll see what happens. And if I'm the grounds crew for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I really hope that there's some rain, some precipitation to help soak up the sod on that field to make it a little bit more mucky. Dak in particular has been bad. Like I said, he's been having a streak of interceptions, and that's been in the last 7 games, and that includes 3 pick sixes, and now he even leads the league in interceptions thrown, even though he's played 5 fewer games. So we'll see if this veteran defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can wake up in the postseason, but I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys by the slightest of margins just because I think a guy like CeeDee Lamb can make a difference. Tony Pollard's been an explosive piece for this offense as well. So I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys, and this will be an end for Tom Brady's stint in Tampa Bay, as I think he'll also be leaving Tampa Bay at the end of the season. To preview the San Francisco 49ers hosting the Seattle Seahawks, this is a third matchup between these two clubs, divisional rivals. To talk about the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, it's been a great story. Geno Smith has now led this Seattle team that was left for dead to the postseason. Now, in these 2 matchups against San Francisco, it's been really shaky because of this tenacious San Francisco defense. I mean, they just get after quarterbacks. They disrupt the game plan, they disrupt the timing, and they force turnovers. I mean, we know that Nick Bosa is a menace coming off the edge rusher spot. They have a really good secondary that gets interceptions, and overall, I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, they get back Deebo Samuel, who's been on the mend with that high ankle sprain, and then they have CMC out of the backfield. They get Elijah Mitchell, who got sprinkled into the action a little bit on that Week 18 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. And despite Brock Purdy having some deficiencies, they can disguise that with guys like George Kittle as a tight end and Brandon Ayuk as the secondary receiver. So this team is loaded, and I think this is just too many things that the Seattle Seahawks can match up against, and I see the San Francisco 49ers winning this again quite comfortably. Now, it's not so easy beating a team 3 times in 1 year, but I think given the talent disparity and this how the matchups went earlier on in the season, that San Francisco should be able to win this quite comfortably. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. As always, take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. Links are in the description. And until next time, I'll see you then.